In this first story, I will remove people's full names out of respect and will refer to them with their initials. In the early days of the pandemic, when Australia was isolated and there weren't any COVID cases here, life went on pretty much as normal. One sunny afternoon, I visited a good friend of mine named B, who I hadn't seen in some time. He was living in a bungalow by the sea with his new partner, M, and I spent the rest of the day there with them, drinking and making art, and I eventually stayed for dinner. M was a great cook and friendly enough, maybe a little withdrawn. She didn't talk too much and seemed to have a quiet sadness about her. Later in the night, she told me about her father, who had raised his two daughters alone and had recently passed from cancer. I saw a photo of him on the bureau, tanned and slightly plump with a gold watch, half smiling at the camera. She told me he was a great father and a huge inspiration to her, and was a monumental figure in her life, and losing him had been a great struggle for her. Late that night, I went home with a head full of alcohol, and the day had left me with a good impression of M. I was really happy for my friend. He had finally settled down and found a good partner. They had a beautiful life out there, by the sea. But as the pandemic worsened and the news from around the world got darker every day, I stayed in touch with my friend over the phone, and we planned on meeting up again. But days turned into weeks and then months, and we kind of drifted apart again. And one afternoon, I was walking through a shopping mall on the way to the store to line up for some groceries. The area was pretty much deserted. Most of the shops were closed, and a grim silence hung over everything. And then I saw M walking towards me. She looked really pale and upset with a wide look in her eyes. It looked like the pandemic had been hard on her. Maybe something really bad had happened. But I smiled and waved at her, but she just looked right at me and walked past without saying anything. I went home a little puzzled by the experience. I kind of rationalised that she was probably a little upset that I had never come back to visit them. Or that maybe there was something that had happened between my friend and M that made her not want to talk to me. But then my phone rang, and it was my friend B. He had come home from work during his lunch break and had found M in the backyard, slumped over the stairs where she used to sit and take her cigarettes. She had died sometime in the morning. I'm now a 45-year-old male. When I was 10 years old, I woke up in a hospital, staring at a little girl sitting in the corner of the hospital room. Now, to explain how this came to be, it started a week or so before the hospital visit. My aunt would take all her nieces and nephews out onto a pontoon boat in the river and wanted to teach us to swim. Now, this aunt was a total bitch and didn't care about anything else but what she wanted. And that was for all of her family to know how to swim, since she lived on a house by the river. It was amazing. There was a rope swing with old bicycle handbars tied to it for the bigger kids to swing out into the river, and the younger kids got to play on an old slip and slide she had ramping into the river, which she somehow figured out how to pump water from the river to the slip and slide so it was constantly running. We all wore our life jackets that couldn't swim, and it was amazing. A day or two went by and we were going to go tubing on the river, and I was excited because I had seen all the bigger kids laughing and hollering like crazy. Well, she stopped the boat closer to the bank, but it was still pretty deep, and she asked if I was ready to go on the tub. I was all excited, saying, "Yes, I can't wait," and she pushed me into the water and said, "In this family, we swim or drown. I was freaking out because I didn't have my life jacket hooked all the way because I was trying to tighten the strap, and I slipped out of it and I watched the world fade away. I woke up what seemed like forever and I was on the shore with my uncle. I almost drowned thanks to that woman. Well, here's when this story got better for those that came here. I slept on the top bunk of the old bunk beds that didn't have railings, and I had a nightmare that I was drowning and was being pulled under. Well, that caused me to fall out of bed head first and hit some old Tonka toys. And if it wasn't for my hard head, I wouldn't be alive. It fractured my orbital socket and put me on hospital for a week or so. I remember waking up with the beeps and the TV on. I look over and see a kid sitting in the corner, with her body and face sitting sideways from me, and then I looked over to the bed next to me and I saw a kid in a body cast. I remember him saying, "Hey, you're awake. Welcome back." I was confused and had no clue what was going on. I asked who he was. I don't recall what he said his name was, but he said he got run over by a four-wheeler and broke a lot of bones. I looked down at the girl and asked who she was, and she looked at me and said nothing. The boy asked who I was, asking about, and I told him about the little girl, and he said, "Dude, you hit your head real good. I don't see a little girl." I was confused because she wasn't there when I looked back down where she was, and my dad came in and he was hugging me and happy to see me awake. I asked what happened, and he told me everything that happened that day that we were all swimming, and he had to go home after visiting hours, and I would be in and out of it every time. I looked at that corner, I saw that little girl. It was scary because she wouldn't speak. I recall waking up throughout life to the point that I would start placing stuff in the corners to see if it would stop. It did for a while and I forgot about her. When I had my first child, a little girl, I was so proud and watched her grow up fast. I remember one night she was around 5 and she was talking to someone through her baby monitor. She was speaking really well for her age, and you could understand what she meant. She was giggling and saying, "My daddy and I freaked out and ran to the room." She looked up at me with a smile and said him and I was questioning who she was speaking to. She snickered and she said, "Her over there," and pointed to the corner. I had flashbacks hitting me left and right when she said that, though that little girl never did any harm, so we just sat and watched. My daughter is now 18 years old and doesn't remember it, thankfully. I've always wanted to know if that little girl in the corner was a spirit waiting for me to cross, or a guardian from the spirit world protecting me from other spirits. Now I know this dragged out a bit, but I just wanted to put it all out there and see if anyone else has had this experience. Please let me know in the comments if you have. I had a conversation with my mom last night, and she randomly told me about something that happened when we lived in this old house years ago, so I thought I'd share it here. This was back when I was in elementary school. I don't remember why we had to move out, but I was really upset about leaving my friends behind. A family we knew let us stay temporarily in their old house while my parents looked for a more permanent place. They warned us that it was old and a bit worn out, but livable. The moment we got there, something felt off. I got goosebumps immediately, and my youngest sibling refused to even step inside. She just stood there crying. The atmosphere felt heavy. The house had 2 rooms and an attic. I used to go up there and I found a bunch of old makeup and documents. On the first night, my sister kept tossing and turning and eventually moved to the other side of the bed. The next morning she told me and made me promise not to tell our mum. Like she saw a little girl sitting on top of the closet, just staring at us. We ended up fighting because I thought she was just trying to scare me. But after that, neither of us wanted to sleep on that side of the bed anymore. A lot of weird things happened during our stay, but that one stuck with me the most. My dad is a painter, and at the time he was out of town for a few days. One night, my mum had a nightmare. In her dream, she saw a man sitting in the living room with a little girl beside him. They were both staring at her, mouthing something that she couldn't understand. Then suddenly, she saw my dad behind her, grabbing her shoulders and telling her to wake up because my sister had a fever. He also said it was 3 a.m. and that there were two men outside trying to break in. My mum woke up immediately and checked the time. It was exactly 3 a.m. My sister, who was sleeping next to her, was burning up with a fever. My mum rushed to the living room and turned on the outside lights. Right after that, she heard a loud thud on the door, followed by footsteps running away. I asked her if she was just trying to scare me, but she insisted it really happened. She also told me something I didn't know before. The owners of that house used to run a funeral home business. My sister even joked that the makeup that we were messing with back then was probably used for that. Yep, I barely slept after she told me that. I moved into a house in Indiana a few months ago. It seemed perfect at the time. Not too big, not too small, decent price, quiet neighbourhood. The moment I walked in and shut the door though, I felt something was wrong. There was this heavy, uneasy feeling in my chest, like the house didn't want me there. I brushed it off as moving stress and just started unpacking. The very first full day, I went into the kitchen and found one of the upper cabinets wide open. I distinctly remember closing it earlier. I shut it again and thought maybe the latch was loose. The next day I was in the living room when I heard the cabinet creak open and then shut by itself. I walked in and it was open again. I still kept telling myself it was just an old house thing. That night, it got real. I was lying in bed when I heard slow footsteps in the hallway. Not normal walking, slow, dragging steps like someone sneaking around. It stopped right outside my bedroom door for what felt like minutes. I lived completely alone, no pets, no roommates. I laid there frozen, listening. This happened almost every night after that. Then the nightmare started, and that's when I knew something was seriously wrong. The first bad one, I woke up screaming. In the dream I was in my bed, but the room was freezing. I looked up and there was a man hanging from the ceiling right above me, rope around his neck, body swaying. His face was purple and swollen, eyes bulging open, staring straight down at me. His head slowly turned, even though his neck was clearly broken. And he opened his mouth like he was trying to say my name. I woke up gasping, covered in sweat. After that, the hanging man was in nearly every nightmare. Sometimes he'd be hanging in the hallway when I tried to run. Sometimes in the kitchen, dripping something dark. One of the worst ones, he was hanging inches above my face, rope creaking, black liquid dripping from his mouth onto me. It burned. I couldn't move. His cold, dead fingers brushed my cheek right before I jolted awake. And that morning I had 3 fresh scratches across my chest that weren't there when I went to sleep. I got scared enough that I bought a bunch of wooden crosses and hung them up all over the house. One right above my bed, one by the front door, one in the hallway and one in the kitchen. I'm not even super religious, but I figured it couldn't hurt. It just made things worse. A couple of nights later, I woke up to a loud thump. The cross above my bed was on the floor, turned completely upside down. The nail was still in the wall. I hung it back up straight. The next day, the hallway cross was upside down, then the kitchen one. No matter how many times I fixed them, they'd be inverted again. One afternoon, I came home from the store and every single cross in the house was flipped upside down at the same time. And that really shook me. The activity kept escalating hard. Cabinets would slam so loud it sounded like they were going to break. Footsteps followed me from room to room, even during the day. I'd feel ice cold hands grab my shoulder or brush the back of my neck. The whispers turned into clear voices saying my name and telling me to stay. Sometimes I'd hear laughing, low and nasty, coming from inside the walls. The final straw came one night. I woke up around 3 a.m. to every cabinet in the kitchen slamming open and shut at the same time. Super fast, like something was raging. When I got up to check, the hanging man was standing in the hallway, fully visible, rope still around his neck, head tilted at that horrible angle. He wasn't in a dream this time. He took a dragging step toward me. I ran back into my room, locked the door, and didn't come out until daylight. That same morning, I found new scratches all over my arms. I couldn't take it anymore. The fear was constant. I was barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. I felt like I was losing my mind. 2 days later, I packed up whatever I could as fast as possible, loaded my car and got the hell out of there. I didn't even clean the place or give proper notice. I just left the keys on the counter and drove away. Alright, this is 100% true. I don't know how, who, or what did this, but it happened. From 1996 to 2000, I lived in Lynchburg, Tennessee, with my elderly Native American great-grandparents. They had a goat farm in a deep valley, and only a couple of neighbours in the same valley. The closest neighbour was actually the Jack Daniels Brewery and Barrett Gun Factory. I liked to explore the woods near Jack Daniels. All the trees were black, weirdly, like something right out of Sleepy Hollow. One time, on such an adventure, me and my friend Alex and Billy found an almost perfectly round clearing. In the centre of the clearing was a trailer home, baby blue and white. I don't know why, but my dog would not enter the clearing and started growling. Curiosity got the best of us. We got closer. It wasn't dilapidated or anything. It looked like someone could or may have actually lived in it, yet there were absolutely no stairs to the door. My friend Alex knocked and knocked and then finally tried the door, wide open. He climbed in and started yelling, "You have to see this." Billy climbed in and he was just as shocked by something. So finally, I wanted to see what they were seeing. I walked closer, my dog barking madly, but still in the woodline. I get to where my head and shoulders are just barely in the door, and I see that there are no internal walls, no rooms, just the frame and walls of the trailer. Then I got an even more uneasy feeling as I realised the floor, walls, and even ceiling is lined entirely with Ouija boards. every square inch of the inside of this hollowed out trailer Ouija boards. I felt an extreme dark feeling. I just turned and bolted all the way to my grandparents. My Granny Jemima immediately knew something was wrong and asked me about it. She went and got my grandpa Calvin out of his shop, and they got on the phone and called over several people. The shaman asked me to lead them all back to the clearing. I was hesitant because I had never felt whatever that feeling was in my life, but decided to take them. This time, I did like my dog and stayed in the woods and watched as several of them climbed into the trailer. Made sure my friends had left because I did not even stop to wait on them when I bolted. The shaman said some blessings, placed talisman around the clearing, then burnt the trailer down to its metal frame and wheels. I witnessed it, the entire structure just gone. A few weeks passed and I felt confident that it was clear and safe, and went back to the area to explore more. This time, Billy and another Zach came with us. We were expecting to go and pick up through the rubble for scrap metal to sell and get Pokemon. About 20 foot from the clearing, I stopped dead in my tracks. The exact same trailer I witnessed burned to the ground was back in the same spot. No friends go with me, we all ran back to our grandparents. They did not believe us at first, so my grandma decides to go with us and check it out. Once again, we're back at the clearing and I see my grandma physically change colour. I'd never seen her pale in my entire life. So she made us run and tell my grandpa to call everyone and return to the field. As the group started showing up in the clearing, you could feel the anxiety and heightened feelings of everyone. The entire time I have a sense of fight or flight. I wanted to get out of there, something fierce. I was urged to stay there. We called even more people this time, and they came with tools, sage, Palo Santo and every other item you can imagine. They had 4 or 5 people smudge the inside of the trailer, once again lined entirely with Ouija boards. They wrapped this leather rope around the centre of the trailer and nailed it to the ground with a big iron rod. They spent most of the rest of the day and almost all the night drumming and chanting and dancing around the trailer. And soon everything started to wind down, and they lit a great fire again, burned it to oblivion just as before. On the way back to the farm, my grandma made me promise to never return there, saying she thought it felt like a prison for a being and just wanted me to stay away. Near the end of me staying with them, I couldn't help it and went to see what had happened in the clearing. And to my surprise, there was another mobile trailer. This time it looked even older than the last and weathered. And there was a light on. I didn't wait around, I left. I never said anything to my grandparents this time because I wasn't supposed to be there. I'm a hunter. I like to hunt wild boar specifically. Though I have been deer hunting and have been known to get turkey for Thanksgiving, I mostly hunt boar. For those of you that don't know, boar are a big problem in the United States. The sow can have 2 litters a year, and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes, with the exception of boar and coyotes. I've been saving for a year, mostly fun money. It's It's hard to explain to your wife that a scope that cost literally twice as much as the rifle I was mounting it on was worth it. But I did it. I took it to a range and sighted it in. There was an area that peppered with boar activity that I knew would be perfect for a night hunt. It was easily accessible with my truck, with easy to find spots that I could set up in that overlooked a large, easy to navigate clearing. The night started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I'd spotted multiple deer, but they were out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen days earlier that probably wasn't much better than my first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of glassing the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbits or owls. The deer that I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night but lively in the day? I'd set up at around 10 p.m. and it was now about 2 a.m. when I started to think about packing up. Maybe setting up a target before I left and taking some practice shots. I heard a crunch come from the direction that I came from before. I panned my scope over and saw the silhouette of a small bear pushing through the bushes. Now it's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision. It's a thermal scope, kind of like black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in a little. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't really a bear. It was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming up from the road where I was perched. And where could he have walked from? I was 30 miles away from anything and on public lands. I was about to call out when I adjusted my sights and noticed he was naked. No shoes, pants or anything. I remember being disturbed by his movements like a squirrel or something. Twitchy and grabbing at the foliage, sniffing around and palming the tree. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? The thought terrified him. Could he smell me? And he did something I still have nightmares about today. He squatted and placed his hands in the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog mid-howl. And I heard it. A voice coming from that direction. A very compelling female voice. Help! I'm lost. There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. The centre of my sights was trained at the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person. It went against everything I'd been taught about firearms. Were they lost? Was this some guy that had gone crazy out there? Why was his voice so feminine? Help, please, I can't walk, the voice called out. That's when I called bullshit. Not only could he walk, when I first saw him he was traversing the land with ease for a naked person. So good that I mistook him for a bear. That's a trap. This guy's trying to lure me to him with a damsel in distress routine. Luckily the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but I didn't give a shit at that moment. I took my eyes off him for a moment to get my pack on. I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction, and I swear I saw a smile. The thermal scope has an effect that makes animals' eyes appear white. It How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must easily have been 150 yards away. Fuck off! I screamed in that direction. He stood upright and it hit me how tall and skinny he was. Easily 6 feet and very lean. He took a couple of long strides in my direction and I instinctively sent a round sailing above his head into the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me. What would I tell the cops? I was unwilling and unready to shoot someone. He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. The next one will fuck you up. Go away. He stayed on all fours, and this time I had my sights trained on the centre of him. His eyes were just above the grass like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice had cracked a little on that last warning. I was terrified. That standoff probably only lasted a minute or two, maybe less. But it felt like forever. In an instant, he bolted left towards the tree line opposite the road. So much for not being able to walk. I could barely keep him in my scope, he was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush and I sent another bullet sailing high in his direction. I racked another round and tried to pocket the mag and swap for a fresh one, but I dropped it and didn't bother looking for it. I wasn't far from my truck and I wanted to get out of there. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up the trail and arrived at my truck breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab but kept the rifle in the passenger seat and sped off. For the longest time I told that story from the perspective of having spotted some deranged crackhead living off the land like some kind of caveman. I reported it to Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting at night alone. Never received an update. It wasn't until I told this story at a camping trip that my nephew told me about Wendigos, rakes and skinwalkers. My story scared the piss out of him because the spot we were camping was technically the same forest I'd seen the bastard just 50 miles east of it. He was so spooked, his mum, my cousin, had to take him home. She was really angry. I've gone down the rabbit hole on these scary stories. I'm not saying what I saw was definitely a Wendigo or a skinwalker. I'm saying that if such a thing exists, I may have dodged quite the bullet that night. Or maybe it was just a tweaker being Donny Thornberry in the middle of the night. Either way, I thought I'd share. I've been telling this story for years now. My friend told me to post this here. I was 14 years old, home alone on a Friday night. My parents were working late, and my older sister was spending the night at a friend's house. It wasn't uncommon for my sister and I to either be home alone or just us two together. So neither of us was really afraid of the dark, or just being alone in general. Anyways, it was around 11 p.m. when I decided to go to bed. I hopped into my top bunk and I turned off the light. And when I finished getting comfortable, I noticed that I'd left the bathroom light on. Now at this point, everyone in my family just slept with their doors open, and the bathroom was right across from my room, so the light was super bright and it basically lit up the hall upstairs. This is when I went to climb down my bunk bed, and then I looked over at the bathroom and I saw it. I watched a tall, shadowy figure walk from out of the bathroom by grabbing the top of the door frame and ducking underneath it, and slowly turning towards my sister's room, where he again grabbed the top of the door, ducked underneath and walked into her room. This interaction lasted for about 10 seconds, and to this day is the clearest thing I've ever seen. It was so bright, and while I was tired, I cannot not imagine that my mind simply just made this up. I was so terrified. I froze there and only thought to slowly fall back onto my bed and stare through a crack between my bed and the frame into my sister's room, waiting for it to come back out. I sat there and just waited for my parents to come home. I was so scared that I was alone, I didn't know what to do. Finally, I heard my parents open the front door. I just jumped off my bed to the floor and ran downstairs to tell them. They asked why I was up so late, and that's when I found out it was 1 in the morning, and I had just sat there and stared for at least an hour straight. I told them everything, but they just didn't believe me at all. Ended up keeping my bedroom door closed that night, and from then on, my sister followed suit the next day after I told her the story. And yeah, when you sum it up, a 14-year-old kid was home alone late at night, saw something scary. It sounds like nothing, I guess, but I will never get the image out of my mind of what it looked like. Everything in that moment was so clear. I can remember the terror going through me so fast I just couldn't move. It's been 10 years and I still don't believe in ghosts or the afterlife or whatever. I just cannot explain what else it could have been.